Hi, my name is Adam Coon. I'm the 2024 representative in the Olympics for the United States at the 130 kilograms in Greco-Roman wrestling. So I started out at a very young age. My dad was the high school wrestling coach at the time. So pretty much as soon as I could hold my head up, I was on the mat. And even before then, I was getting passed around to the other parents that were watching practices and stuff like that. So I was in the wrestling room since I was very, very little. And I grew up on the mats, kind of wrestling with the other coaches' kids and that type of stuff. I slowly started falling in love with it a little bit later, but I was always kind of around the sport since I was very young. It wasn't until probably late junior high that I started making strides in the fact that I was starting to get really good in my area, so that we were trying to push to find, other competitions to go after. So I started getting hooked up with like the cadet duels and the schoolboy duels was what they were called at the time. We would travel to other states and take on competition from other states and stuff. And first I got my butt kicked for sure, but then slowly started adapting and developing from there. And I really fell in love with wrestling around that time because one, I was seeing people I hadn't seen before. It was kind of that new blood, new competition, and it was something more to strive for and something fun I hadn't done before. The camaraderie you get from being on a team rather than just the people you grew up with, it was all the other people that were there that were traveling and doing the same thing you were, that we just had a lot of fun doing that, staying in the hotel rooms and maybe staying up too late, causing too much noise in the hotel rooms, but just kind of having fun on those trips. And that's really why I fell in love with the sport. It's just a lot of those external factors kind of helped to push that. And then I started getting better and better. So kind of just slowly progressing, getting better and better as kind of the years went on. But that's kind of where it all started. Right around that age that I was kind of getting into it was right around when Rulon ended up beating Alexander Karelin. And then I began watching him in 2004, winning his bronze. That was kind of my first intro to the sport, was kind of watching that and kind of mimicking the whole, farmer aspect. Now I'm from a small farming town, farm town as well. So I kind of identified kind of with that if like a farmer from like a small area can figure it out, then like maybe I can too. And that's kind of where that dream kind of developed from. And my dad was my high school coach. So he kind of coached me all the way through. And, we had our own little signals of, hey dad, now it's time to be a dad, and hey coach, now it's time to be a coach. So we had to come up with, kind of that balance as well. And yeah, there's definitely, like, it's never perfect. We had come up with a system quite early, so we kind of negated a lot of the conflict that happens, but sometimes, passion takes over, sometimes things get a little heated, all those little things where sometimes like, hey, I didn't wrestle well, I need dad, and dad wanted to be coach, and but nothing ever too bad because we had implemented the system beforehand of like, hey, like during these times I need dad and during these times I need coach. And we knew exactly what those looked like in each situation. My mom was always super supportive all the time. My sisters, not as much to start. My mom had to drag them to some of my tournaments, but as time progressed, they found their own ways. And even after I had left and attended University of Michigan, my sister still found a way to come down to duels and stuff like that. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, finding her way over there and super supportive all the time. And then now being my wife is just, constantly supportive of everything that I've been doing and backs me 100%. So just that support system is huge. There's a lot of flashy moves and stuff out there that are really fun to watch, and they work well with people that have really good sets of basics. Where they fail and break down is the people that don't have the basics, don't know how to move their body right, don't know how to be in good position when all this stuff goes on. So learn your basics first and drill them until you can't drill them anymore. Basics is what wins, putting in the hard work and knowing what that looks like and making sure that you are giving full effort on everything you do. So put in the work, drilling that, do the hard things first, and just kind of get after it. And kind of the main overarching thing about all that is just know what your goals are and just keep striving toward those goals. I still think those at a young age and those that are going up through the system, I think should try both freestyle and Greco, and then obviously folk style as well. I really think they work well with each other. They both complement each other and do, well. And then once you get older, then you can kind of make that decision. I hit the senior scene wrestling both freestyle and Greco, both all the way through up until the 2020 Olympics. And the reason I chose one is because I wanted to make sure that I put in full effort into the one style and I wasn't like splitting time per se. 2020 didn't go my way, so when I came back to wrestling, that's kind of when I started going Greco, just simply because I was having some better results there. That's why I chose to go that route, and I needed to focus on just Greco in order to make it happen. So the reason I left wrestling is because I was having a lot of questions, I was having a lot of doubt. One, kind of my ability, and two, if I even wanted to continue wrestling. I was asking questions of coaches, when did you know it was time to retire? And when those questions start bouncing around your head, you're kind of in a not right mind state to continue on wrestling. So I remember having a conversation with Coach Mormet, and he kind of asked me, what would you be doing if you weren't wrestling? I said, well, if I never picked up wrestling, I'd be playing football. We had some connections in the NFL that had reached out to me prior to that point, that right after I had graduated from college, asking if I had any interest in playing the NFL, and ended up getting a tryout with the Tennessee Titans. Ended up signing a contract, and I was with them for the kind of beginning portion of the preseason before I had a neck injury that ultimately got me cut. And then I spent the next year or so training kind of the best I knew how to do it. One, from what I knew about wrestling, and two, from the period I had with the Titans of how the offensive line, how they train their footwork, how they train their stance, their movement, their learning, studying the playbook. And I was able to kind of take a few of those things back with me when I come over here. How do I tweak my training just slightly to maybe get just a little bit better in this area, because maybe I'm not training as optimally just because I have some biases of wrestling. So I was just trying to, do some cross training and see how other people peak as well. So some things worked, others did not, and hopefully I'm coming up with the right formula to get me to the best level to be at. I think the biggest thing is the mental that kind of came with it, because I had left wrestling at a spot where I didn't know if I wanted to finish wrestling or not. Going through that, different training processes, different everything, I reached a point where I knew that this wasn't the route that I wanted to go. And it kind of reset everything in my mind of, okay, we're going back. I have a new reinvested love in wrestling, and we're going to train just a little bit differently, but we're going just as hard. As mentioned, we got 4 Olympians in that room, one of them being Mason Paris, who I like working next to. I like working next to all the other guys, but it's really fun to kind of compete with him. We were both Michigan heavies with the goal of always, sealing out duels, and he had a very successful career. I had a pretty successful career, so it was just always that little friendly competition that we had going on. I really like working with him. Occasionally we'll get to scrap with each other. As you imagine, it's a little different with the freestyle and the Greco. It doesn't do him any good if I'm trying to do shots on him and he's doing defense, because I've lost that skill a while back. And then vice versa, if he's trying to do body locks. We still hand fight with each other. We still do some parterre stuff, have a lot of fun kind of doing that. So I really love just the atmosphere we're in, competing with each other, whether or not we're the same weight or not. There's always some sort of competition going on hey, we got to get better, and the goal is medals.
And an Olympic qualifier, Colton was in it. Were you watching that live, and what was your reaction?
I wouldn't say that I was, gung-ho, hey, go for it type thing, but definitely rooting them on to, get the weight class qualified. It's a very nerve-wracking experience watching it, just because you have zero control over what ultimately is going to hopefully be your fate. So was definitely nervous for him, and I took it as try to step back as much as I could as a competitor wanting to ultimately beat the guy. And after he was done wrestling, I remember just kind of hey, awesome, thanks Colton, appreciate it. But the mind crossed the head of okay, but now I need to take it from you type thing. So it was right back to training the next morning of, okay, now I have a new mental mindset of, okay, now I got to steal it.
You didn't go your way in 2020. What was the changes and differences that you made from the last Olympic trials going into this one?
There was a couple changes that I made. I ended up bringing in, Coach Momir, bringing him in full time. So he really helped to adapt my style to be a little more efficient than what I had been wrestling before. And I'd worked with him a little bit in the past, but be able to work with him for a year really helped elevate my wrestling. So just kind of working with him, getting positions better, and then just mentally being that state of mind of we're going to get after it and we're going to wrestle. We're going to go super hard, and we wrestled hard and we figured out a way. A lot of excitement, a lot of relief, just because this was my 3rd Olympic trials, and to actually finally be going, there was definitely a lot of excitement and kind of relief that, finally had overcome that obstacle, especially against a guy that I had had a lot of losses to. I'm just excited to compete, just to really see the level that I'm actually at. The training's hard and difficult and very long process, that the competition part, it just makes it so much more fun. So I'm just really excited to be out there just competing and just doing my absolute best.
What Adam Coon are we going to see you step on?
You're going to see a warrior. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to wrestle as hard as I can. I'm going to leave everything out on the mat. And that's what you're going to see. It's just fighting tooth, nail, and claw for every single point, defending every position. Parterre position doesn't matter. You're just going to see a warrior.